Hey, we're getting ready to get started. Everybody if you can get a seat, we'll go ahead and get started. You know, I'm real big on getting started on time and getting out of here on time. Hey, good evening, everybody. Hey, welcome to the April meeting of the Sandusky River Valley Beekeeper. And so I'm going to call the meeting to order. And hey, do we have any folks here that's new from the recent initial bee class? Hey, welcome. Hey, we sent out the March meeting minutes after the last meeting. Can we go ahead and approve those? Can I get a motion to approve those? A second?
Sure. We have names.
Any discussion on the minutes? All right.
Second that.
Dennis. I'm going to ask Tammy to do the treasurer's report. Not a vote.
Yeah, vote on them. Is there any discussion?
Is there any discussion on the minutes? All in favor of approving the minutes? Any opposed? Okay. And I'm going to ask Tammy to do the treasurer's report.
As of 3/31/23, we have $6,410.97. And this past month, we have had $50 of donations.
Thank you, Tammy. All right, in the newsletter, you saw that I was tracking the 2023 club membership. Looks like we're going to end up with about 125 members for the year. So that's where we're at with dues. Wanted to talk a little bit about March presentations. Had a fairly busy month in March. We did a group called, I have trouble with this word. I have a group called the Philanthropic Education Organization in Port Clinton. Pretty good sized group, and they came out to the barn. And then I did the Bellevue Public Library, and we also did Alpine Assisted Living in Fremont. So pretty busy month with presentations. And hey, folks in the group who would like to be presenters, we have a list. We'd like to capture your name, because as these requests come in, I'd like to find like a person that's right there, you know, locally. So it's either that or Chris Earnhardt, the vice president, gets to do all of them.
As long as they're on Fridays. Don't bother you.
I'm just kidding you, Chris. So, hey, looking ahead at April. Yeah.
I second that motion.
Hey, looking ahead at April, we've got several presentations scheduled. We got the Gibsonburg Public Library. Deb Johnson, where are you at? Deb's going to be doing the Gibsonburg Public Library, and she's also going to be doing the May 1st Retired Postal Workers in Toledo. So thank you, Deb. We appreciate it. Also Thursday night, one of our club members, Jamie Garza and Tammy, is going to be doing the Scout Troop out of Bellevue. They'll be doing that at the barn. It'd be probably 30 scouts and their parents. And then April 22nd, we've got Earth Day at Osborne Park. And right now we've got John Schick, Doug Ritchie, and Becky. Okay, I'll capture that. And we're looking for a couple more volunteers. We're gonna set up next to John Schick like we did last year. He sells honey, and then he's got a lot of trinkets and different things. And he's really excited about talking to people about bees. By the way, keep John Schick in your thoughts and prayers. He does have surgery tomorrow. And so just wish him a speedy recovery. So also, I want to remind the new beekeepers or anyone else that'd like to attend, April 15th at 10 a.m. we have the new beekeepers coming back. And we're gonna dump a package and we're gonna simulate and talk through installing a nuke. So that's on April 15th at 10 a.m. So you're welcome to come out for that. We still have bees for sale. Tom Rathman is still taking orders through the olddrone.net for packages. Tom, do you have any nukes left? Tom's got 3 nukes left, so if anybody needs a nuke, make sure you see Tom. Those will be gone soon. I also got notified last night from a property owner in Fremont that they have 4 acres along the river, and they were asking me if we needed it for a bee yard. And we told them that we would mention it here at the meeting. If anybody's interested in that, you can talk to us and get their information. You know, might be a good place to have a second bee yard. And I want to look ahead at topics. So this month we're talking about spring hive splits and a few other things that lead into spring hive splits. Next month we're going to have Peggy Garnes, the OSBA president. She's going to be here and she's going to be talking about using nukes in the apiary. That was a big topic that when we asked for feedback from the group, that folks said that we'd like to have some information about this. So Peggy will be here next month. Then in June, we got Mike Gergley. You know, Mike manages his hives in single hive bodies. And so when I was thinking about this, you know, I think about how I manage my brood chamber and you know, I think about, I've got 2 brood boxes. So I got more room for air than he does. And he's able to manage his hives using a single brood box. And so I'd like him to talk to the group about that and how he manages his brood box. So, and then in July, we're going to have pests and diseases. And then we're going to have an open meeting for August. We don't have a topic for that yet. So if anybody has a topic for August, send me an email and we'll get it out in front of the group. And with that, has anybody got anything they want to talk about before we get started? Yeah, Chris. Hold on a second.
As you're duly sworn and elected director for the OSBA, I kind of got to give you my spiel because the boss is coming next month. Where was I? Oh, there it is. You got to register your aviaries with the state. You know, it's $5 a yard. I know that some people don't. I was guilty of it too. So I ran for election, and me and some other people didn't do that. But it's $5 for an apiary. The address. You just ask you how many times it is. That $5 goes to also for the inspection fees and a lot of other stuff the state does. All of us probably go to Kroger's, get your Kroger's points. Check the percentage purchase. See, Kroger's will donate to the state of Ohio. The OSBA, a percentage of your purchase. Amazon used to do it. You saw that with Amazon Prime and all that kind of stuff. You know, if you don't have an organization to give somebody their Kroger points to or a percentage of your purchase, you don't lose anything. Check out the B thing, also license plates. But the big thing probably is membership. Membership's $20, family's $25, lifetime is $200. I kind of figured it up. Hello. I kind of figured it up that I was going to live longer than 10 years. So I became a lifetime member. And because of the lifetime member and some of the other people that like Tom and they made sure we got little pins and a sticker for being a lifetime person. But it'll save you some money. Also, what goes on with the membership is they do have a good website. They have a lot of training videos. It's not a lot of BS. You know, it's done kind of like what we had the guy last meeting come in and do. So, take a look at that. You know, they also get a monthly, quarterly newsletter, has a lot of articles in it that are good. Plus they have, what's the little newspaper they used to have? In the Hive or something like that. That was yeah. And it came out and it had a lot of information, but there's a lot of archives back there. Yeah, so a lot of information, good information from around the state. So if Peggy asks you next week, tell her I did something.
Hey, Chris, can you hold on to that mic? Because we're gonna have a discussion here.
Okay.
All right.
Now,
Hey, so tonight we're gonna talk about spring hive splits. And so I want this to be something kind of like we've done a lot in the past is, I don't want to do all the talking. I'm gonna ask for some experience from other beekeepers about some of the things that we talk about. Because that's really the power and the benefit of belonging to a group like this, is when we talk about topics, you got a lot of experience here. And so we're able to make friends with other people, get to know other beekeepers, and then learn from each other. It's a lot more reasonable to make less mistakes. It's a lot cheaper to make less mistakes. And you can do that more easily by listening to other people. Experience is a hard teacher. Hey, I want to talk about spring hive splits. And, I always like to start out talking about the weather. And I'll tell you, I track weather. And so if you want to compare last year to this year, it's actually pretty dramatic change. Last year we had 5 days in March that was in the 70s. And I got in a little bit of a hurry with some things. Anybody relate to that? I got in a little hurry, it was getting warm. And I did some things that probably did them too early. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But last year we had 5 days. This year we haven't had any days in the 70s in March. This year we've had 3 days that just barely got to 60. I think one day was 61, and I think the highest day was like 63. But it was like an isolated day. You didn't get a bunch of days in a row when you could really get out in the hives. But the 50s, we had 9 days. And so 50s for me is days that I like to go out and check the food and, have a look at the hive, see the bees flying. I put pollen substitute out when it's 50, but I still don't open any hives. We had 8 days that was in the 40s and 11 days that the high was less than 40. So just think about that, where we've been in March. And the reason this is important is we're talking about this little time frame, this March, April, and May. I always consider these some of the key months in our beekeeping season. I mean, this sets the pace. I mean, this is the time that I look at expanding my bee yard. This is the time that I try to get ahead of things and get my hives in good shape. That's why this weather is so important. And now I'm into April. Any of you look at the 10-day forecast? What are you seeing?
Rain.
Yeah, we got rain coming, several days. Wind. On the positive side, though, if you notice, we're headed for the 60s. So hold on, the warm weather's coming. I'm hoping to get a break. So that's my weather discussion. And spring weather is really unpredictable. You get a week of rain, you may not be able to get out and do anything. I kind of mentioned this, when I look at outdoor temperatures, I can get out just about any time and crack a lid open and look at my food stores that I have on top. I keep a sugar board on top of every full hive and nuke. And I'm always peeking in there looking to see, are they into the sugar? And some of them are. We've had to add some food. I tend to put, once we get into like mid-March, those days when we get up around 50, I'll put out pollen substitute. Usually just put some in a 5-gallon bucket on its side and let the flying bees find it. That gives them the protein component, right? Everybody with me? Yeah, that queen, you know, she's gonna start laying. So all these days, you know, when we've been complaining about the weather, you know, if it's been 50 degrees, you know, she's in there working. Okay. So myself, I wait until I see at least 60 degrees and a fairly consistent pattern of 60 degrees before I start doing any intrusive hive inspections. I don't tear anything apart until I'm in the 60s and I have like a consistent weather pattern. Everybody okay with that? All right. Now I want to talk about some spring challenges, because I feel like we got to talk about this before we get into talking about worrying about hive splits. How many of you left, or how many of you got sugar boards on your hives? Okay. How many of you in the spring find that those empty sugar boards are full of drawn out comb? Nobody? Am I the only one? Okay. Well, I'm going to talk about it. You know, if I delay getting into my hives, temperatures in the 60s, I've had years when I've had several sugar boards that actually had comb built out in. And in that comb, I found eggs.
Your microphone quit.
You dropped it down.
No, I think it's it might be about okay.
Can everybody hear me?
Here, let me see this for a sec here. And I'll check it out.
All right, everybody hear me okay? Kind of a loud mouth. What do you think, Danny? We won't get into that. So I like to talk about sugar boards, and the reason why is when these sugar boards are empty, you know, you can actually end up with a comb and bees and eggs and cat brood stuff in that sugar board. You might find yourself up there tearing that apart piece by piece, because there might be a queen up there running around. Okay, so this is one of those little challenges that spring brings to us. The sugar board's a real handy thing, but I got to get that sugar board off. And if it's full of comb, I can't just rip the thing off because there might be a queen up there. All right. And then, how many of you left supers on your hive over the winter? Okay, about half of mine have supers on. So there's no queen excluder on those hives. Thank you. Everybody hear me okay without a microphone? All right. So we've got supers on a hive. What's the chances of a queen being up there in that super? You know, we know the bees like to work up. We know that they've probably been up there eating honey. So who's an expert in getting a queen down out of the super? So you put a queen excluder around. Who's done that?
You can't even find it.
Take a note of that.
Rosemary. No.
Rosemary can't find a queen.
Can't find it, no.
No, but I talk about this because these are challenges, and these are points where you can get yourself into trouble with your queen. You know, if your queen is up top in this hive, I got to get that hive restored. I got to get the sugar board off. So the other thing is I got to check that super. I mean, that super might be full of cat brood, might have eggs in it and larvae, but I got to get that queen back down in the brood chambers. Okay, I usually just pull a frame out and kind of lay it next to the top brood box and kind of jiggle a little bit and let the queen run off into the brood boxes and slap that queen excluder on. And eventually all of the cat brood and the larvae and the eggs and everything will be gone out of the honey soup. It's just, think this through as you're restoring your hives, because it'd be real easy to lose a queen. You know, let's say you pinch her. A couple of years ago, I had a hive that had 3 honey supers on it. Don't know how the queen got up there, but I found her up in the honey supers. And I put her back down below in the bottom box, and they killed her. Now, I can only assume they killed her because maybe her pheromone was so far away they couldn't sense it or something. But pay attention to the queens. You know, this is a situation where you could hurt a queen, damage a queen, or a queen could die or be killed. This is the time of year you got to stay on top of that. Everybody with me? Everybody excited?
Yeah.
All right.
Gary.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a queen come to your hive that I never marked my queens, and I had a queen in my hive I never marked. She had a white dot on it.
So you had a queen that wasn't the queen that you had in the fall?
No, it wasn't. I never marked them, because she was marked, but she was in my hive. She got a free queen.
Yeah, I should read them somewhere. Why does it mean that it's 2 years old? Oh, this will be the 3rd year. Last year's yellow, last year's color was yellow. The year before that was white. So if you got a white queen, that queen was, this is its 3rd year.
Yeah,
So congratulations, you got a free queen.
yeah, well, that hive died, though.
Oh, no. Well,
Well, that's
hey,
a win.
it's good while it lasted.
Yeah.
Hey, other challenges that we have in the spring, you know, we talk about this weather. And it gets you to where you can't hardly get in the hives. You know, it's raining, we get these cold snaps, but I'm gonna tell you, inside this hive, that queen is still rocking and rolling, she's working. And so one of the challenges that you can find is when you get into your hives, you can have some really strong hives. But what that does is that pushes you to move closer to doing hive splits pretty quick. And we'll talk about some other things we can do. But strong hives, we're not going to talk about weak hives tonight. That's for another night. But these strong hives, you know, when I look across my bee yard and watch them flying, I can already see where the strong ones are. I mean, I've got a couple of this year that are they're just crazy. And so I know those will be the ones that will need immediate attention. Everybody with me? Okay. The problem with having a really super strong hive is you can get an early season swarm. Okay, who's had a swarm in April from a full-size hive? Anybody? Nobody? All right. How about March? Okay, yeah, you don't usually see swarms in March. But I'll tell you what I know is in our apiary, last year we had our first swarm the 2nd week in May. So here's what that means. Before we get together next time on May the 1st, depending on this weather pattern, you could see a swarm in your bee yard. Okay, and so between now and the time we get together again, if the weather's decent, you're going to find yourself doing a lot of these things. Because, you know, Tammy and I always laugh about if we haven't had a swarm by Memorial Day, we're going to get it at the week of Memorial Day. And we try not to get hive swarms, but hey, the best laid plans doesn't always work out there. Any questions? All right. Let's talk about what we can do with those strong hives. You know, you think about swarms, what we're really talking about is this queen, this hive, this group of bees is really getting tight for space. Okay, so on my strong hives, I generally get my supers on right away in March when I first get into them. I'll get honey supers on. I'm trying to give them room is what I'm doing. Okay. I'm sorry, what did I say? I'm sorry, April. Everybody's looking at me like, hey, I just turned 65. Yesterday, I turned 65. Everybody know that? I'm on Medicare. Yeah, Tom, what'd you say? I did. I did. So what I generally do is in the spring, when I get into warm weather, I will put honey supers on my strong hives right away. And yeah, I use queen excluders. So the only time that I don't put a queen excluder on is if I'm drawing out new comb in supers. So. The other thing we should be looking at, you know, the queen will run out of room because, you know, the bees are out there, they're gathering nectar and they're bringing it into the hive and they're basically putting it in the combs and the queen's running out of space. Every time a comb gets filled, that queen is getting a little tighter on space. All right. One of the things we got to be watching for is how much nectar is in those brood boxes? Does she have room to lay? Is the whole box full of nectar where she doesn't have any room? Okay. Who wants to talk about reversing brood boxes? Anybody? Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Oh, I don't know anything about it. I hear that during the year, the bees will move up into the top brood box and leave the bottom one empty, and if it is empty, maybe swap around, but that's all.
Yep.
That's it.
Well, that's why I wanted to talk about this tonight, because this is one of those. Well,
Yeah.
I like to wait till it's about 60 to do this, but you got to do it early enough. But reversing the brood boxes, what we're really talking about doing, what we often find in hives in the spring, we'll find the cluster of the bees up in that upper box. And the bottom box will be mostly empty. And so the bees are really not getting much advantage out of that lower box. Now, one thing we have to be careful of, though, you know, if you have the bees, the cluster to where they're in both boxes, you don't want to reverse these boxes. You don't want to separate the bees to where half of them's in the top and half of them's in the bottom, because you might not have enough bees for them to keep themselves warm. So when you look at your hives, make sure you get a look at that lower brood box. You'll see if it's empty. Terry, go ahead.
I got a chance to do that this week. And when I was picking mine up after they all blew over, I picked up the first box that was laying there. It was empty. There was nothing in it. I threw it aside, grabbed the next one, and set it on it. I didn't put the second one back on because I had a super on there. I was just trying to get it back together. But most of my bees were up in that upper box. The bottom box was empty. Well, because they blew over or what? But there was nothing in it.
Yeah.
So I mean, they were all up in there.
Yeah.
Yes, I've already done that.
One thing with them blowing over, if you go to Lowe's, they've got tent stakes, 2 foot tent stakes, really sharp. Nobody knows where they are. They think they're in the garden section. They're in the concrete metal where you have the metal rods for concrete. They're right next to those. I strapped them all down. Secondly, I'm new to beekeeping, but I scoured the internet last year and I've been pretty lucky. This morning I went out, one of my hives, two had the bees, the bottom of the hive was just deep, just all on the outside, just sitting there. Throughout the winter, I use on a first responder side, a Littman stethoscope. You can tell exactly where your queen is within 3 inches, just by the sound. So I stethoscope it up, I know exactly if they're in the lower hive, the upper hive, or in the supers. and you can hear her move. And you can hear the bees elsewhere. If there's no queen there, they're really quiet compared to where the queen is. So if anybody has like a Littman stethoscope, get a good one, about $100. And I'm going through an inch of insulation and still tar paper. And I can still hear exactly where she is. So,
Heard that before.
yeah, so, and this morning I went in and I heard that she was getting into an upper super. So, I actually put another, brood box on the bottom. I didn't want to split yet, but
Yeah.
those that were just filling up everywhere, I just got another brood box on.
All right.
So the temperature is okay to do this now?
I like to see 60.
I didn't break anything, because I could tell I'm out of honey. Oh, and my top supers were already capped with brood.
Yeah.
I mean, I look in and it's all brood capped.
No, that's a good thing. Yeah, just have to reverse the box, but that's good.
And
No, that's a good problem.
they're my supers though.
Well, yeah, they usually. We know something could fall.
Hey, we got another, yeah,
So with that situation you have there, then when do you decide to do a split?
we're getting there. We're getting there. You know, just be patient. Man. All right. So, you know, the idea though, is when you move that brood nest, move it to the bottom box, now they got a whole other box to work with. And also you got heat going up there from the bees. And so, and you know, the queen will tend to work up. And so that's the idea, is to give her more room, to make a lot more bees, a lot more usable space. All right. Now we're going to talk about hive splits. Go ahead, you volunteered.
Go ahead.
So how do we do it? How do we do it in high school? What do you think?
Very careful.
We got a lot of experience in here. How do you do it?
Make sure the bees are.
Yeah, okay, so that's a good point, Doug. I like to make sure my bees are ready. In the perfect world, I have an upper box and a lower box that are pretty strong. I got plenty of resources. I tend to stick with what they call a walkaway split. I don't know if you've ever heard that term, but I'm one of these folks. I like, you know, I got 2 boxes of resources here. And, you know, ideally what I want is I want to split these resources between these 2 hives, because I'm starting with 1 hive and I'm going to end up with 2. There's going to be eggs in both hives. You know, I'm going to go through these hives and look at them, make sure there's eggs in both of them. Theoretically, I could just split them and walk away, but I don't do that. What I like to do is I go through my hive and I find my queen. And I know which box she's in. And so I'll make a single box hive and I will take that queen and half of the hive and I will take her away to another bottom board. And what I do is the other half of the hive, I will leave it on the existing bottom board because there's foragers out there. And I want as many bees as possible to get to come back into this hive because I'm going to let them make their own queen. We're going to talk about queens here in just a little bit. My strategy this year is I'm going to let my bees make their own queens. It's not what I did last year. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, hey, this is not black and white. This is, when you talk about queens and making splits and spring, we're talking about risk. Risk to your queen, risk to your hive. I want to talk about that because you got to make a decision on this. All right. So I have this strong hive, 2 brood boxes. I've already said I'm going to go through it and find the queen. What I do is I usually make sure she's in that upper box and I will take that off, put it on a new bottom board and move that to the other end of the bee yard. I usually put some pine, some pine branches. I'll tape them across the front so the bees coming out, they know that something's happened. There's been a change. They're not where they used to be. Or I will move the hive to another bee yard. But then I still have a hive in the original location that doesn't have a queen. And that's a problem. All right, but I want to increase the number of hives in my bee yard. I don't want to have a bunch of swarms. Let me talk just a little bit about queens. Here's your choices. And I'll share my experience with you. I talked to Dr. Stone. His experience last year was completely different than mine. But you can make hive splits, and you can go out and you can buy a mated queen and introduce it into your hive. Here's the problem, though. I can't call, Tom Rathbun and Linda Miller and Evelyn Lepard. There's a group here that make really good queens in the summer, or early in the summer. But the problem is, in Ohio, we're not able to make queens this early in the year. So if I want to go get a mated queen, that queen's either going to come from Georgia or Florida or California. And so let's talk about risk. So I got a hive here. Local queens aren't available. What if I put this queen in there? Let's say I go pay $35 or $40 for a California queen, and I put her in the hive and they don't like her. Okay. Hey, I got to tell you, I lived this last year. I bought 18 queens. 60% of them were superseded. So think about that. That means I put them in the hive, and almost immediately the bees that were in the hive superseded it. There was something about those queens that my bees did not like, to the tune of 60% of them. And then I had one of them on top of that was a drone layer. In other words, she never got mated. And I got to tell you, this is still, I can still feel this in my heart, what happened to me last year.
And your blood pressure.
And on top of that, Tammy reminds me about this every time we talk about spring bees. So that's what I want to tell you. This is a decision you're going to have to make. Is, do I go buy a mated queen and get it in the hive that doesn't have a queen? Now, Doc will tell you, Doc Stone bought a bunch of queens last year. Got them from Florida or Georgia?
Georgia,
Got them from Georgia. Didn't have any problem.
you're great.
He said, man, my bee yard took right off. So, there's risk there. And I can just tell you this year, I'm not going to go that way. This year, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to try to narrow that window down and make my splits as late as I can, so that maybe we have enough drones to get queens mated decently. I'm going to try it. We'll see.
What are you talking late?
Well, I like 60 degrees. Tell you what I'd like to do. I'd like to have this done by March 1st. I'm sorry.
No wonder you have trouble with your queen hive. That sounds wrong.
All right, you're right. So what I'd like to do this year is I would like to have all my splits done by May 1st. And if the weather's good, I might try to back that up a week. At least get all my strongest hives split.
By back up, you mean earlier or later?
Well, I'm going to shoot for May 1st, but it's going to be based on the weather. I know that as I get into May, I'm going to start getting swarms of those strong hives.
For back up, you mean going into April?
Yes, April.
Latter part of April.
What I'd like to do is, it would be great if the last 2 weeks in April ends up being great for weather. That'd be the perfect time for me to get in there and make splits. But you never know. You have to see what the weather does. And I mentioned, how well is a new queen mated when you buy her? I gotta tell you, I told you I had one that I put her in the hive, went back and checked, and she's a drone layer. She's never been mated. She wasn't mated well enough. So I tell you this because there's risk associated with going out and buying queens, just like there's risk with you letting them make a queen. Yeah, Rob.
Some of the things are out of our control with weather and such. But if you're looking at doing that, you'd be feeding pollen patties like April 1st, so that she's laying, so that you have the brood to grow the hive, so that it'll be stronger.
Yeah, well, that's true, but remember,
Back all the dates up.
yeah, remember, there's two pieces to this, though. There's gotta be eggs in that hive to make that queen, but I've also gotta have drones out there in that drone cloud to make that queen. So, it's a timing thing. Okay. Now I'm gonna talk about my hive making its own queen. There's risk with that. You could have weather, and I'm gonna talk about this timing here in just a few minutes, but drone population, is the weather warming up? We got plenty of drones out there to make these queens. And then what if this queen goes through her whole development and she flies off for a mating flight, she doesn't come back? Okay, I might find myself having to put another frame of eggs and some more bees in there and start over again.
Might have a white dotted queen in yours.
If I'm lucky, I'm supposed to have one still down in the bee yard. She should be in there. So what I wanted to get at with this is no matter which way you go, there's some risk associated with queens when you do splits. So, and I just tell you, think it through. How many of you remember this little chart? I always talk about this in the beekeeping class. I keep this in my glove box in the truck. And so the reason this is important, I got that box there, that lower brood box that is going to make their own queen. Now, they're going to make it from eggs. And since they're going to make it from eggs, I'm out here in this 1 to 3 days, but it's going to take, I like to do some round numbers here. And I like to think about, making a new egg or making a queen from an egg. I'm looking at about 2 weeks for her to be flitting around in there. And then, from what I've read about preparing for a mating flight, you see anything from some writers will tell you it's 4 days. Some people say it's 8 days. I usually just say a week. Once a virgin queen's in there, figure about a week for her to get strong, finish getting developed. She's still got some reproductive stuff that's got to develop, but I figure about a week. Then she's going to go on a mating flight. That's probably going to take, 3-4 hours. And then figure it's going to be a week before I'm seeing eggs. So you see the pattern here. I got 4 weeks, approximately. I got about 4 weeks where I'm waiting on eggs.
June 1st.
Well, you do the math. So let's back up to this chart here. Remember, I've got bees in the hive. I got cat brood. I got bees being not hatched, but emerging. And I got bees dying. So I got this, ooh, you need to help me here. I got this complex math equation going on here. I got bees dying, I got bees emerging. And it's going to be about 4 weeks before I see my first egg come from that queen that I just had made inside that hive. That's if everything goes well. And then to make matters worse, it's going to be 21 days before that egg that queen lays, those fertilized eggs, it's going to be 21 days before I've got some new workers coming. So you see how this is all hooked together? What happens to that queen is important to that hive. Something happens to her, you're going to have to take some action. You may start out letting them make their own queen, and let's say she doesn't come back. You might find yourself in a situation where you can't wait to let them try to make another queen. You may have to go buy one. So it's something you gotta think through. Yeah, Uma.
Now, if you're looking, if they're getting ready to swarm. What's a percentage of times when you're gonna start seeing queen, extended queen? Like, yeah, already being developed, I mean, you'll see it, so you time that
Queen cell.
to the queen cells, because.
I'll just tell you my experience with this, and I open this to anybody that would want to answer it, but. What I find is when I see swarm cells in a hive, especially when they've got them pretty well closed up, they're gonna swarm.
Right, so can't you, just before, like a few days before they swarm, put them in new
Are you a gambler?
box, what's that?
Are you gambling?
Well, everything you've been doing last week, years, yeah, also, so.
Hey, I'll tell you what,
Percent,
Uber, you are absolutely right. If I could find the exact time when those bees are gonna swarm, I could rush in there, I could steal that queen out of that hive, and stick it over here in another hive, and problem solved. They're not gonna swarm if they don't have a queen, right?
18 queens later.
But here's reality. Bees swarm, and often you're not around when that happens. And so often you go in and do a hive inspection and you see swarm cells. And first thing I do is I start looking for the queen. Did I get lucky? Can I get her out of here before they swarm? Sometimes I can do it, a lot of times I can't, they've already swarmed.
so my question is, I mean, I'm doing a lot with my stethoscope, I'm reading online, some people are doing that also, but I've not heard anybody. Do swarming or bees ready to swarm within a few days have a different sound tone? Are they more active? So, when I have experience, are swarms ready to swarm more active in the hive a few days before?
They're active outside the hive.
I can't listen to those. I'm just wondering.
But you would think that they would be if they're active outside.
I'll tell you what I've heard, what I've been taught. I've been taught that they run the queen around and thin her down so she can fly. And but other than that, I can't tell you if they're more active or not. I've never tried a stethoscope. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, the signs, like, are they getting honey found in your brood nest?
Yep.
If you're putting a lot of nectar in that brood nest, you know she's gonna run out. If you go in your brood nest and you're finding 6 or 7 cat brood frames, you know within a week or two, that hive is gonna have twice as many bees. You know, do you have the room for that? If you're gonna do a quick check, you know, most of the time, they're gonna run swarm cells at the bottom of the frame. So you just take a second box, you tip it up. Take a quick look at those queen cups. Do they have any larvae in? And do the same for the bottom, if you want to do quick checks. So it's not the sound as much as the other signs that they're going to. Those are the major.
I don't want to open it up.
You know, one of them. You know,
My wife always yells at me, I know what she wants, so I think it's easy with it.
every now and then. Well, when you get in May or April, May, you're gonna have to open up because a lot of things are happening.
Sure, you would say that.
That's good.
Oh, no, she's not here.
That's good.
She gets.
Gary,
Yeah.
on your
Louder.
your bruising. On your box that you do not have the queen, would you just have like a lot of eggs in that box?
Well,
A lot of bees.
I like to have a
A
lot
lot
of
of bees, but you would think you need a lot of eggs and larvae, more than what that you would leave with a queen.
That's what I do. I will make sure that the box without the queen has a large abundance of both cat brood and eggs. Okay, cat brood and eggs, because cat brood is gonna bring you more bees. But I also make sure there's just a lot of bees in that hive, because they gotta make a queen.
So it's gonna be a larger box.
Yeah. What do we got? Yeah, Rob.
The other side of your calendar, because of that length of time, you gotta be thinking, Do you really want a queen to start trying to lay in early or mid-August when everything's drying up? They don't have the resources to build and feed and grow strong enough to get through winter.
And you know, that happens, I mean, we have late season swarms. And usually in those cases, I go see Tom and say, Tom, I need a queen. Because a late season swarm, that hive's in trouble. Because they're not gonna have time to make a queen. You're gonna need to get a queen for them, or they're not gonna make it through the winter.
I was more talking about doing splits. You wouldn't want to be doing a split in the end of June.
Yeah.
And by the time all the dates work out, you're into August before, she's fully mated and there's these come from.
Well, that's true most of the time, but when Peggy comes next month and talks about making nukes, she might change her mind a little bit about when to make those.
Doing these splits are great. Splits are great, and it's good to do it, and we all have to do it to control our swarming. The most important thing that we ever talked about is your drone population. If you don't have a drone population, you're doing it too early in the spring. And it takes 24 days for that drone to emerge, and it takes another 20 days for it to become sexually mature. You can raise a queen in the middle of January. If you make it queenless, then you can make the hive warm enough. Don't raise a queen if you won't get mated. So that's the big part of it, is you gotta have drones. So don't be making splits this week if it gets up in the 70s and say, well, they said at the bee club, we can make a split when it's 60 or above. No, don't do it now because the drones aren't ready. You might see the drones in your hive, but the drones will overwinter. Some do overwinter with their cluster. And I don't know this for sure, but I've heard that drones that overwinter are quiet. They're not really much good for anything, not even for mating. So they kind of lose their mojo. So I was talking to Joe here, and Joe said that he's got purple-eyed drones already. Well, we looked it up on the internet. Purple-eyed drones are day 14. So day 14, on day 24, they're going to emerge, and then another 20 days after that, that drone will be ready to be mated. And so you're just going to have to calculate and read what your hive's got. You've seen a lot of drones running around. You got drone crews, the big bullets down at the bottom. Here are a couple open. They're expendable. You can look at them things and see where they're at in their stage, and then you can kind of figure out, hey, I got 15 days, and this drone might be ready to go. And it takes 16 days for the queen, so you got to kind of do your little math with that to get the queen emerged. And then it's a week later. There's a thing about a kite at the back of the bee isn't strong enough, but the queen isn't strong enough to fly off. She'll fly off your frame, but she's not strong enough to fly 3 miles away to get mated with a bunch of drones. So her shell's got to harden up, and that's what is all timing on that. And virgin queens are very, very skittish. You pick up the frame, and if you're lucky enough to see one, but they do look a lot like the worker bee. They're quick. They run all over. They're like sunlight. They're on the backside of the frame before you know it. And if you try to catch it, it'll fly right off the frame. So you got to be really careful what you're doing, or you can screw your hive and blow up with that. Well, yeah. So the drones is a big part. Now,
You're seeing drones, right?
I haven't looked in my hives. These 3 have. So
I saw very few today, not enough. I have cats.
Yeah, I have food too. I haven't seen any drones yet.
I have cats.
there are a couple open and look at their eyes. Their eyes are dark purple. That's like day 14, 15, somewhere around there. And then on day 24, they're going to emerge. So you can almost kind of start doing your math when the swarming season is going to start. You get a bunch of them. And Troy Livengood, the past president of the club here a while back, he was the bee inspector, and he always said with the dandelions with full bloom, that was the beginning of swarm season. And that's pretty much true. And we don't have dandelions yet, so.
Not yet.
I mean, you might see 1 or 2 here or there, but your whole yard is full of dandelions.
Good. That's good information, Tom.
So dandelion brings is around when it works.
What's that?
The dandelions come out when, about when the film starts.
Yeah, because that's their first
Yeah.
big true nectar flow. I mean, they're getting off the dandelion. And that's when they'll start running out of room inside the hive.
All right,
And if you see a lot of pollen coming in, that's another.
yeah. Yeah, I saw a lot of pollen coming in today. So is there any questions?
I had a question from the.
Yeah.
owner. She asked, rather than just moving away the top box with the queen, what about preloading the lower split box frames with plenty of larvae and brood while queenless?
Well, that's essentially what we're doing. I make sure the resources is balanced between the two boxes when I go looking for the queen. So they have everything they need to make the queen.
Okay.
Yeah,
I know you said you could block the entrance of your, the hives if you didn't do a split. What about the distance between those boxes? Can they be fairly close?
well, I don't block the entrance. What I do is I will,
Interfere with the entrance.
yeah, the lower box that doesn't have the queen, I will leave that on the same bottom board, in the same location. So the foraging bees will come back into that hive. That hive's gonna have more bees in it, which is what I want. But as far as the hive I'm moving away, what I've done before is I will move I know you're supposed to move a hive like a mile away. Up between our two bee yards, it's less than a mile. And I've even put hives out an acre away from where I do the split. And like I said, I always split a couple of pine branches across the front of the entrance of the hive. Just hang them across, don't block it. Just hang it across so bees coming out, they know there's something different. And I don't know how scientific it is. I had read this in a tea article, and it seems to work well. So we do it when we do it.
So move them as far as you can. if you
Yeah.
have the space.
Yeah. Hey, is there any other questions? Yeah,
I have a hive. It has a tremendous amount of bees. But the chickens keep coming around the hive. Will chickens eat the bees? Does anybody know?
I don't know.
Mine sure don't.
Will chickens eat bees?
No, mine don't.
You could just eat the larva.
The bees love the pollen from the chicken feed, but the chickens never mess with the bees. They can do that. I've got like 13 or 14 chickens. They will never go near that.
We can grow some stuff.
Bees will be right in there. Yeah.
I have a question, Gary.
Yeah,
Okay, my beehive that dies, there's a lot of bees that are stuck in the comb. Could I still use them and the bees clean them out?
well, I like to look at those. If it's likely that the hive starved to death, which a lot of times it is if the bees are just stuck in their comb. I try to shake as many of them out as I can, but the bees will clean them up.
Yeah, I did do that, and all the combs were cleaned out, even the sugar tree was gone.
Yeah, Doug.
My bees are in my backyard, and the most I could physically move a hive is probably about 20 yards. Is that gonna be enough, even if I stick a pine
Pretty
branch?
tight, but you can try it.
Remove the other one.
I mean, the worst can happen is the nurse bees will stay in on it. Worst could happen, you might have a few of those foragers that go back to the hive. Not that big of a deal.
I lost one hive and it was just, I opened it up, cleaned it all out. And there was too much moisture in the hive, so some of the honey does have mold on over it, on top of the cap. Will they just clean that up?
Yeah, they will. Okay, we are 1 minute before 8. And we need to do door prizes yet. I remember my agreement with everybody is we try to get out on time. A lot of people's gotta work tomorrow. Yeah, make it quick.
On my bottom board, I've got tons of dead mites, fully grown dead mites. Are they, usually I don't see that well developed and just dead, does that mean my bees are grooming themselves well? And tossing them down there, or
Well, it could, I mean, you gotta remember, they've been down there all winter long.
I clean it every
But
2
it,
weeks?
okay, so it is likely just grooming, I would think.
All right.
All right, so we're gonna do the door prizes. What do we got,
Yeah, all kinds of door prizes.